will have done. You will have done really well. Now I'm going to talk you through it, and we're going to look at some of the features later, because I want you to consider this for your exercise later in the day. Okay, because this is really well produced, and so I'm impressed. Now, how do we produce magazines? We start, now can I have slides, Nora? Because it's really important stage of magazine production. I mean, it'll show how they're produced. Okay, if we have the next slide, please. Okay, so this is how I produce a magazine. I want to know what's going in the magazine, and I start by using an Excel spreadsheet. So do you know about Excel, some of you, any of you?
Yeah.
It's a way of calculating content and money and things like that. Accountants use it. Anyway, I use this to decide which articles I'm going to use. Some of them are regular, and you can see on the left that some of them are all by the same name. So one section is called The Edge, and one section called Voices. Can you see that? Yeah. So they are regular sections. So for instance, now Voices is this, and it's a regular section of articles. So it's and all we have to do is find articles that suit it for the magazine. The other section that you will see is called The Edge. And this is all about tools. It's very boring for you, I suspect, but it's all about tools. And again, on that list is about tools. And then elsewhere, there are features. There are features in the magazine. There are lots and lots of features in the magazine, and they're the ones at the bottom of the Excel spreadsheet. So that is how I decide what is going to be in next issue of the magazine. And I try, oh, well done. I try to be planning. It's all about planning. I try to plan 3 issues at a go. So I've got 3 issues worth of. Okay. So there you can see Voices and The Edge, and then you can see feature at the bottom. And actually the section saying honed is no longer in the magazine, got cut because it wasn't relevant. But Voices is still there, and there's a page of reviews, and then when you go further, in that case there are 4 pages of reviews. So now if you scroll further down, if you can, all right. So those are all the articles for the Edge section, and then the next ones are regular columns. So Iwakuni and Sincox and Mac are all regular writers, and the rest are all features which are different in every single case. And it adds up to 64 pages, because there are 64 pages in this magazine. There it is. Now, if you go to the next slide, please. Okay, and you might have to make this a bit smaller.
Yeah.
Go to all. Now this. Okay, that's okay. This is what's called a flat plan. This is what we call a flat. Yeah, that's good. So this is called a flat plan, and this is what we show is in each issue of the magazine. So if you go along, it's Voices at the beginning. So Voices is always at the beginning, and The Edge is always at the end, and the rest are all features and regulars of various different contributors. And that I cannot produce a magazine, or I couldn't produce a section. So if I was producing So say I had just got a job, the first job of doing an editing job, and I was editing, say, Voices section of that magazine. I would do a mini flat plan of that section to show exactly what articles are going in the section. And that I cannot produce a copy of the magazine without a flat plan. It's like the moment I have a flat plan, I feel confident that I can produce a magazine and I know what's going on. If we have the next slide, please. This shows, so I've done the flat plan, and this lines show what I've got. It shows. So the next stage, and these lines all show, and I use these in pen, and this is one here. So this is how I start. This is the flat plan. This is exactly how the magazine is produced. It's all blank. So I start with a completely blank flat plan. And this is the way you should plan anything in a different way. In radio, you would plan how long each section is, how many minutes, how many hours, whatever it is. And then this is the flat plan on a piece of A4 paper. And each of these, the crosses are all in ink. So I can do them all the time. So I know what's going on. So once I've decided what is going on, my next stage is to work out how the writing. So when I did the first thing, the spreadsheet, I'd also use that as a moment I commissioned the articles. So I'm contacting all the contributors and saying, right, I need 1,000 words by the 1st of February, or I need 500 words, and I need 5 photographs, or I need 10 photographs. Whatever it happens to be, I'm commissioning them so I know exactly what I've asked them for and when I'm getting it. So I know there are a certain number of pages in the flat plan that are ready to use. And on the 1st of February, I know they're going to arrive. Then the next stage, as you can see in your list, is that the writing and the photography needs to be done. Now, these have all changed. Writing is pretty much the same as it's always been. Photography is a big issue because of phones, basically. And phones are so good at photography, we no longer need. So when I started, and until I guess about 5 years ago, I suspect, we were commissioning photographers to go out and take the photographs. So if you went and did a feature and you were the writer, you would either do the photographs yourself by using a camera, by using a quite expensive camera, or we would also send a photographer. This made it difficult because you had to organize both the writer and the contributor and the photographer, but also very expensive. So that's one good, really good thing of changes in new media, is that we now don't have to worry about sending a photographer because the quality of iPhone 11s, 12, 13s is so good. When I first had an iPhone, which was my little iPhone 5, my little iPhone 5, 7, I produced one issue of one of my magazines with the cover of an issue purely using my iPhone 5. So I produced an A4 cover just using that tiny little camera. So even then, 10 years ago, I was able to use a camera, and that has transformed the way we produce magazines. It also means that it's available for social media, so you can Instagram very easily. And things like Instagram now will take images. When I first started, you couldn't send an image that was very high resolution because you had to convert it first before you send it into Instagram. That's not a problem. Now on that can you see that screen of the PowerPoint? Because I can't see it on screen. Have you got it? Can you see it? Here we go. Okay, so the next stage, the final stage is the next stage is editing the words and designing the magazine. Now, this is when you decide what sort of job. Now, how many of you want to be writers? Do all of you want to be writers? Hands up. Yeah?
Me
Do you all want? Yeah. Do you all want to be writers? Now, do any of you want to be designers? to design or produce magazines? Okay. Now, one of you said that your father was a creative director of a magazine. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm going to try and pretend I remember your name. I'm going to say that's Sheeny. Are you? Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. I'm getting better at this. As creative director, he probably is responsible for the design of your magazines. And he has to be responsible for different types of magazines. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so he done a really good job of making the design of Business Today very different from Explore. Now, it might be that some of you want to get into that field of design, or you want to get into or in editing. Now, these days, the people who edit, they're called sub-editors largely, and they take the article and they make all the corrections and they check all the writing, the grammar, and they'll check the facts, and they'll make sure that the facts are right. Otherwise, there is a risk that you will be taken to court for libel, which has happened to me. I have been done for libel. On one particular case, when I was on the sailing magazine, I said something about the picture of a boat that I thought was being badly handled, what I didn't realise, and I said it was about to hit a pier, was about to hit the side, hit something, hit the ground, not the ground, but the pier, the jetty, whatever you want to call it, because it looked like that, but it wasn't. It was avoiding it. And I said, or one of my contributors said, it was about to hit and sink. And we got it wrong. And unfortunately, the skipper of the boat was a very famous skipper. So we got it really badly wrong. He ran a course in sailing. And so we implied that not only was it good, that he was bad, and it was bad quality and dangerous. Anyway, he took us to court, and we were taken to court, and we had to pay, I think it was £10,000 for damages, because we had undermined the quality of his school. So we got in a lot of trouble for it. And it happens. It happens. Yeah, it seems funny now, but it wasn't funny at the time, because I got in a lot of trouble because of it. And especially as I just launched the magazine. So the sub-editor will will edit the copy to make it better to read. And that's a great job for journalists to become, because it changes, and I became that. I wanted to be a sub-editor rather than a writer, and that's what I did. It means these days, quite a lot of sub-editors also become magazine or newspaper designers, because now, do any of you know, how many of you use Apple Macs? Many of you as laptops, most of you. So do you know software like InDesign? Do you know InDesign? Yeah?
Yeah.
How many of you use, because I can't see you all, how many of you use InDesign?
Yeah. So just one.
Okay. Well, you will learn it. You will have to. You don't have to, but it's something you learn, and because you do design. Well, okay. It's interesting you say that, because it sounds like none of you want to get into the design side of magazines. So we'll avoid that in the future, because you all want to be journalists and writers. Is that right, Jeannie? You all want to be writers.
Most of us.
Most of you. Well, writing, you still have to be careful about libel, and check your work and check it and check it and check it. I do get complaints, and usually I make mistakes because it's the last thing I write, and I get overexcited and I get impulsive, and I write too quickly, and somebody doesn't notice the mistake, and you make a mistake. After that, after it's been designed, all the pages have been designed, the articles are proofread for another check that they're all correct, and then they're sent for printing by making PDFs. And there you have the magazine, and then it goes to press. And that same sort of process will go for radio, and it should go for all types of media, in that they should be planned, they should be commissioned, they should be written, photography should be done, edited, and not necessarily designed, and then checked and checked again, and then sent off to the radio. It's the same for all media, but you just in a different style. Now, okay, so now we look at the careers of, we've sort of talked about this. In fact, we've talked a lot about this. So, Noel, can you go to the next stage? Next slide. Okay. Now the two main jobs for you, well, the three main jobs for you. I have been reading some of your newspapers. So I've been reading The Observer and the Sunday Times in particular, because I haven't found it easy to find the daily or weekly newspapers. So I've been reading the Sunday Times and The Observer. And they are a mixture of reporting and feature writing and editorial assistance. So there are events and things like that. The thing I've liked really best is Impact by The Observer. This is a really good section, I think, of the Sunday Observer, because it's full of, I've got it here, of newspaper, of features, and of small pieces of events and things like that. Do any of you look at the Sunday papers?
Sorry?
Do any of you look at the Sunday papers? They
work or you read?
Do you read the Sunday Times and the Sunday Observer?
Yes, we do.
Because they're really good, and I know it's difficult for. This is the bit I really like. So this is the section I really like in the Sunday Times. So I like Impact in the Sunday Observer, because it's full of different features, and there's some events. So some things would be done by editorial assistants, and some, and this is the section that I like. You there? I can't. Is somebody asking a question?
No, sir. The Sunday Times you're talking about probably a magazine, but in Sri Lanka, sometimes the newspaper.
So I didn't get that entirely. What were you saying?
The Sunday Times that you just showed us, sir. Can you hear?
The Sunday Times.
Is that right? Am I hearing? It's all right.
Well, the Sunday. I don't know about the politics of these different newspapers, but the Sunday Times has a section called Plus. I think it's a small, and this is.
Sir, can you hear me? Hello?
Where's the customer?
Sir, can you hear me? Hello, sir?
Hello,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, go on.
Oh, okay. This Sunday Times you're referring to, is that a newspaper or a magazine?
Is news? Sorry,
Is it a newspaper or a magazine?
newspaper. So the Sunday Times is a newspaper, but this section, these 2 pages, are like a magazine, but they could be written by somebody who's quite junior. So this article here about this festival. So it's about a festival. It's called the Academic Players, and that could easily be written by a editorial assistant as their first article.
I call him.
Trying to. Oh, it's moving. It's moving.
Sorry?
It's moving. It's moving.
Okay. You can see now?
Yeah.
Zoom.
I already.
He's showing something.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
We couldn't see you.
Can you see me now?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, and can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a section on called the plus section. Okay, it's 2 pages of the plus section. More than 2 pages. It's more than 2 pages. And this is, I think, a really good section and worth reading in the Sunday Times. Now, I'm not sure whether what they write, because I have been told, and I'm not sure if this is right, that one of the newspapers is more towards the government and some of the newspapers aren't. Is that right? Okay. Well, this.
Talk to the mic, please.
So this one is private. There are most newspapers printed private companies.
Okay, so this is a private newspaper. It's a private newspaper. Okay. Well, this section plus is really good. And if you could get a job helping to produce this section, I'm trying to. So here is another. So this is a. So there are a little bit a book review. So there's a big book review, which you would commission somebody to produce, but it's not clear who's written this review. So it could be a member of the team who's written this review. So it's a really good section, I think, of the magazine. Most actually have got a name of the person who wrote it, but it's a really good selection of articles. I really enjoy it. And it also has other things as well. It has crosswords and things like that. And this, anyway, is the sort of thing that a junior journalist might be responsible for joining this team. And that happens in news on radios as well, that there might be journalists who go onto those, go onto the radio show, which is regular. The other type of writer is a specialist writer. We've spoken about before, and about how Shayla could be a specialist writer as a lawyer. The reporter is someone who goes to news reporting, and we've spoken about that. Right, now this is probably a more important section of the, so could we move to the next slide?
Yeah.
This.
Okay, before we start with the types of features, I want to talk about how, now I know you're taught in this, but from the perspective of a magazine, how you write the best possible articles and which articles are some of the reasons that I commission particular writers, or because I accept articles that are being sent to me. Okay, do you think this will help? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are certain things that the first thing is that the first paragraph is really important, okay? Really, really important. And there is a rule, but lots of people don't abide by it, and you might already been spoken to, and it's not necessarily true in other media. But there is a rule that the first sentence shouldn't have more than 24 words, okay? The first sentence of an article shouldn't have more than 24 words, because it's too wide and too wordy, you might say, that and too rough, and it doesn't capture the idea that's in the article. That first sentence and that first paragraph is what's called the hook. It's the hook that links something in the media already, and it makes the reader want to read the article. So the hook might relate to the headline of the article. Normally, headlines are written after the article is written, when the article has been designed. But the headline is likely to be written in a similar way that attracts the reader to the first paragraph of the article. When I read a book, if I go and read a book and I decide whether to read a book, the first thing I do is read the first sentence. And by the first sentence, you very quickly can understand which are the best, what the writing is going to be like for the rest of the article. The other thing, so I'm really important to get the first paragraph right, and it shouldn't be too long, about 2 or 3 paragraphs. Now, sometimes when you are first writing articles in magazines or anything, and this is a rule of thumb, is you quite often have real difficulty writing the first paragraph, and you have like writer's block, because you can't quite work out how to write. Now, sometimes the best thing to do is ask yourself and tell yourself, okay, I'm going to write the second paragraph first. I know this sounds difficult, but sometimes it's easier to not write the hook first, but to write something about what you're saying rather than you want the reader to read. Because it's really important that you're linking to the reader and you're fulfilling a need for the reader. But sometimes you can convey that better in the second paragraph. Personally, I now don't do that because I can get into an article really fast. But if you're new to it sometimes and you have writer's block, now it sounds perhaps who's saying you might be suffering from writer's block sometimes because your confidence isn't, you lack sometimes confidence. So sometimes it's better to write the first thing that comes into your head and just write and write and write, and almost write by a stream of consciousness and write it out, and then go back onto it and then write the first paragraph, which sums up what you've written in the rest of the article, and it attracts the reader. And that is really important, your first paragraph, because also your first paragraph is what sometimes you will write in a short piece for social media. That's really important. Now, one of the other things that I always look for is, so if I'm thinking about what do I look for in a journalist's article, so a new journalist article, is I look, and this sounds strange, but I look for capital letters in the article. So I scan down, and not capital letters at the beginning of sentences or the beginning of paragraphs, although it does matter at the beginning of sentences, because if there aren't many sentences beginning, it means that there's too much writing and the sentences are too long. Ideally, each sentence says one point, one particular thing, and then the next sentence says something else. It doesn't mean their sentences can change topics and roll the reader along as you go. So each paragraph is slightly less important than the paragraph before, until by the end of the article, the paragraph is almost not redundant quite, but the less further down the article, the less necessary the article, the words are. Anyway, so I look down an article and I scan for capital letters. Now, the capital letters and numbers are facts. They're evidence that there are facts in the article. So the facts are the names of people, the names of places, the dates, the type of product, the name of a book, the name of an author, and they're facts, because facts are essential in a good article. And I'm going to look at an article I picked out just by chance from Living magazine, and it was an article. I've got loads of them here. Okay, so this one is about. So this one is an article about a particular car. Can you see that? So it's a test by this author, Matt Ranasinghe, about a particular. Now, if you scan down it, there are lots of capital letters, names of the companies, things like that. That's fairly typical of review and quite obvious. But there are lots of articles you'll find which don't have capital letters. That means that they're opinions rather than facts. So if I look, so this article in the Sunday Times has a reasonable amount of capitals, but not as many as I would like. It's this one, so not so long, well, actually quite a long time ago, I was commissioning somebody for the first time for an article. This became absolutely essential to my career. It was a contributor, I think I mentioned it earlier, who drew in more readers than any other contributor or writing I have ever made. The magazine was launched and became the best-selling magazine in its section. And to be honest, if I was to say so, it was that article which made it so popular with readers. And the reason was, when I read the article for the first time, he wrote the article for the first time, it was full of facts. And that's what attracts readers. You cannot say opinions without facts. So try and get as many facts into an article, short sentences and facts, what I like to see in an article. And then you can commission it, you can commission the writer and use the article in the magazine. It's what earlier I was talking about what's called a call to action, and facts mean a call to action. When you see a book in an article, you think, I'll go and read that book. I'll order that book on Amazon. If it shows a website, you'll say, I'll visit that website. I'll learn more. It's a call to action. Personally, from all the magazines I've had, that's what I want to see in a magazine. What else makes good writing? I'm trying to think. Not too long. Keep your articles shorter than you think. If you write an article of 1,500 words, see how much shorter you can make it. George Orwell, do you know of George? How many of you heard of George Orwell, the author? He wrote 1984 and Animal Farm, two of the most famous books ever written in the world history, really. And he had some various rules of writing. And one of them was, if you can shorten a sentence, so the number of words, shorten it. So if you use 3 words, can you use 1 word? Never use foreign jargon unless you have to. So if you can avoid using words in a language that isn't your language, it probably is difficult in Sri Lanka because you use English and Sri Lankan, and I suppose Tamil as well, universally. But fundamentally avoid using foreign, because some of your readers won't know the meaning of those words. One of the mottos that I have is never underestimate the stupidity of your reader. It's very, very easy for journalists to think that the reader is cleverer than they are, and for the journalist to assume that readers understand everything they write. It's really important to remember that. And don't underestimate that you won't do this. You will do it, and try, and make sure that the reader understands. Now I'm trying to remember Orwell's other important. He has 7. You look it up. Look up George Orwell and his tips for writing, because he has 7 of them. Never use a long word when you can use a short word. So if you use a word of 8 letters, see if there's one you can do for 7 letters, because what you're trying to do is get as much into a smaller space as possible. Now, sometimes you'll want, the editor will want more words, but you get those words by not by coming up with opinions, but try and find more facts and more quotes. Quotes are absolutely critical to good writing, because it gives across the thoughts, the ideas of other people as well as yourself. I'm trying to think what his other tips were. He was a great writer. And read his books. And he wrote books about writing with tips about writing, because he wrote in a style which was very journalistic as well as about facts. There's a style of reporting, and it was called New Journalism, and it had some fantastic writing. And I'm going to give you some ideas of people to read. One of the best was Tom Wolfe. Tom Wolfe, and you spell it W-O-L-F-E, what they did is they wrote facts, but they made it almost like fiction. Now, I'm not recommending this. This is a difficult thing to do, but it is inspiring for a young journalist to read this. It was written by a man called Truman Capote. He was an American author, and one of the books he read, which I thoroughly recommended, was In Cold Blood, and it was a book about a murder in the USA. And he had the facts, and he did the facts, but he did it in a way that he had to assume he knew some of the information. And he researched it and researched it and researched it, and it is just written brilliantly, absolutely brilliantly. So if you can find some of his work, I really recommend it. Now I'm thinking of other books that some of Orwell's books are really good. They're largely fiction, but he did write articles about good writing. And I'm trying to think of other authors that I would really recommend you read as inspiration for your career as writers. Because as we were talking to Hussein, I was talking to Hussein, it's all about wanting to write. And wanting to write means you also want to read and read and read and read. And I'm trying to think of other great authors that I would always read. It'll come to me in a minute, so apologies if I can't think of it at the moment. I'll think of them at lunchtime and tell you after lunchtime. Now, I'm going to go through some of the types of features, because after lunch, we're going to see, maybe I'll introduce it before lunch, we're going to see how you can come up with ideas for features for magazines. The simplest one, and you see this a lot, so I'm going to take some features from Living Magazine. Now, if you had copies, and if I was there with you today, which I'm very sorry that I'm not, because if I was there with you, I could perhaps have better communication with you all and ask you more questions and let you ask me. I'm not, Zoom is brilliant, but I'd much rather be there with you now. But it's a long way from Ambalgoda to Colombo, and you're only there on Sundays. Anyway, so there are articles in here which are, I'm going to go through some of them and look at some and show you articles. Well, to start with, the fashion section, that's it. Somebody, sorry? Are you talking to me or to one another? I can't, if you're talking to me, I can't hear you.
Right, I am. That's a big example.
Yeah, go on. I don't think that one's working. Go on, start again. I don't think that mic is working.
Change the.
How about now?
Yeah?
Yeah. You can take that. Can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, yeah, okay, so I wanted to ask, then, we told the link, right,
Sorry, you're going to have to say that again, slowly and louder.
can you write it on the paper and just hold it? Oh, this is, yeah, there are papers, are giant paper,
Yeah.
giant paper, or you can use this. Maybe I want it. Can you
Yeah, come. So,
just say that you type it,
she'll type it.
I'll type it and send it to you.
Yeah, come, Nashal. Come on. Yeah,
Ah, I like,
she's
I
going
like
to type.
I'll type it and send it to you.
Refer your message.
Yeah?
You can feel it to the board also. Board is writing.
Can you hear me? Is somebody asking a question?
Just a bit,
You type it. It's fine.
What are you doing with the camera? Can you just wait? Camera Oh my
I don't know how to read it out. Hold on.
Yeah.
I was doing that earlier. So can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
She's typing in the question because she can't say.
I might as well just.
it.
I wanted to ask, when it comes to writing articles, like how lengthy does it have to like be like, is it always practical to shorten it? Like you don't like, where do you draw the line to like, cut it, like you said, shorten the articles, like.
Articles can be very long. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because
Paragraph.
like even you write paragraphs and then what details like do you exclude? Like how do you know like which to include and not to? Because sometimes you don't know which pieces of article, which pieces of because sometimes it could be like even the minor details could be entertaining or like, I don't know, useful.
What? Which parts of a magazine article are useful? Is that what you're saying?
Right? Zoom in. It's like.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Are you asking how to tell how long to write an article?
No, like I'm asking like when we exclude pieces when it's lengthy, like does it like, do we like have to like, what kind of like when you shorten articles, right? do we
Yeah.
have always like exclude everything? Like where do you draw the line? Like when you short articles, does it always have to, minor details can be useful to include, right? Sometimes.
Yes. I suppose what you do, as I think I said, is you cut.
I mean, see, this, like, I think some people would consider, like, for example, reading, like, in books like Life of Pi, there was this one time, in the beginning of the book, they describe, the author describes like 3 pages describing habits of the sloth and all that, right? Very
Yes.
informative. And most people would consider that extremely boring. But all those facts are extremely important to the character of Pi at the end of the book, right? It's those additional information adds to it, you know. Not everybody gets it.
I understand now exactly what you're saying, and it's a really interesting point because, and it's really interesting because if you start with too much factual information, A, it can be really boring, and B, you tell too much too early, because what you want to do is for people to read as much of a magazine or whatever it is, or listen to a radio show as is feasibly possible. But at the same time, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, but at the same time, you don't want to make articles too long. And I have to say that I think some of the Sri Lankan articles in magazines are a bit long. And the trick is you want people to know early what's going on, but you want to keep flowing, so you're repeatedly telling them more and more information. So it's very common in an article, in the first paragraph, to give some information which tempts the reader to read more. And so you might say you've got a couple of points to discuss. I mean, and The Life of Pi, I mean, it was a brilliant, brilliant book. And as you say, it almost gave too much information at the beginning. I seem to remember it was about a zoo to begin with. Is that right?
Yeah, and then like he went on to describe the sloth and how it's like viewed as indolent. But then he says that this indolence can be viewed as a meditation thing. You know, the sloth's attributes of indolence is actually like meditation. He views it as a peaceful thing about it.
Okay. I don't remember them all that well, but I do know what you're saying. And when it comes to journalism, the thing that you want to think to yourself is it's a perpetual rolling, it's like a rolling ball, really, in that you're rolling from one paragraph to the next. Each paragraph must have a separate thought, but it may be 2 or 3. So say you've got, I'm trying to think of an example. So say, hypothetically speaking, say you're writing about a film. And so parts of the film that are interesting is the plot of the film and the actors in the film, and say any book, the original book that a film is based on. Now, the first paragraph, you might talk about, say, a sentence about the actor, sentence about the film, sentence about the location or the inspiration, but not give very much away, just enough to make the reader want to learn more. And then the next paragraph will give them more information, but not all the information. So again, they read the paragraph, and it gives a sort of similar level of progress to the topic as in each of the subject matter, and the reader flows on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And you want to carry on that right to the end, each time tempting the reader, sucking the reader in to read more. until at the end. So say I've written 1,500 words for an article to go in the magazine, and the editor suddenly says, oh, I only want 1,200 words. Now, rather than editing all the words, which is one way of doing it, rather than editing all of the words, what the editor really wants to do is to be able to cut the words from the bottom and just take the final, or maybe not the final paragraph, but maybe the previous paragraph. Because quite often the final paragraph will end in a sort of a surprise, not surprise, but an important point. But you ought to be able to remove some of the earlier paragraphs, and that then gives you a shorter article without having to lose the feeling of the writer, because each writer has their own style, and you have to be very careful not to change the style. And the same is true for the writer themselves. You want to keep your style and develop a style of writing. So what's true in news reporting, you don't necessarily have a style. News reporting and your first work as an editorial assistant, the more important for you to get the style of the magazine, to understand how long the sentences are, what type of words do they use, how do they use, all the different ways that a magazine editor gets the style of the magazine. So they may use lots of short words, they may use longer words, they may use whatever it is. And in news reporting, it's very similar from one newspaper to the other. So early on in your career, you will be following the style of the publication. Later, as you become better known and you're better at the job, it's your style that becomes more important. And as I say, you'll be able to edit. I once was editing a friend of mine's book. He had written a memoir of his life, and he thought that he wanted to shorten it. He wanted to combine different paragraphs, different chapters together. And I said, okay, I'll edit it. And to start with, I edited it in the version of a journalist. So I made it feel like it was written by a journalist. And then suddenly I read it again, I realized I'd lost all his style and all his sense. And I then had to go back to the original and then just cut it by cutting out unimportant sentences. Does that make sense to any of you, some of you? Or
Yeah, it makes sense. I think I get the point about, getting the reader hooked and everything. But for me, I think the question is like, sometimes sometimes some things that a reader might consider that's insignificant at the beginning and like uninteresting at the beginning might be a point that's extremely important to include in the beginning. That's important to make an extremely important point at the end, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. You do want to make an important point at the end. But sometimes it means you have to cut out some sentences or paragraphs before the end, as I was mentioning there. The difficulty, you're absolutely right. The challenge is to tempt any reader to read the first paragraph with both information but also style. Is that what you're saying? And therefore,
Yeah, because there are people who would say Life of Pi, for example, is a book that's kind of boring because of those initial paragraphs that didn't get them hooked, right? Because of all that information at the beginning.
yes. I mean, Life of Pi isn't quite like journalism, is it? But you're right. I mean, I bet now there's a book called War and Peace, a huge book by Tolstoy, and it starts for the first about the chapter. All it is describing people, and it's very difficult to get through it, and it's very boring. But actually, if you do get through it, it becomes really interesting and a really good book. And I think that's what you're saying of Life and Pi, that it's very easy to put off readers by being too boring at the beginning and giving too much information. And you're absolutely right. It's fair, and it's a difficult skill. It's a skill you have to learn to tempt readers with the hook, with that first sentence that makes it interesting for everyone. So give me a topic and I'll try and, I'm trying to think how we can experiment with this. Give me a film or something like that. Okay, I'll tell you what, the final James Bond film. Have you ever seen the Bond film, It's Time to Die? How many of you, have any of you seen the Bond film?
I have. You seen the James Bond film Time to Die?
You have seen it?
No, I haven't seen it.
Well, you wouldn't say at the beginning of the James Bond review, if you're reading that James Bond dies, for instance, you wouldn't say, okay, there's part of the James Bond film in that he early on he gets separated from his girlfriend, and later on they get together. Now, you wouldn't say all of that early on in the review. You would. So early on in the review of that, you might say that. How would you tempt people to think that? I mean, you tempt it. Perhaps you'd say that for the first time you see some humanity in James Bond, some sadness or something like that. You would put in something along those lines. Does that make sense? So you would give the reader that they're going to discover something interesting in the film, but you don't say what it is. But rather than Life of Pi, which was too factual, you hold back your facts. It's very easy to put too many facts in each sentence. It's very easy to do that. So you can say, you could say something like about James Bond. You could say the spy from London. You could say the spy from London in one sentence. Now, it might be easier just to say he's a spy, and then in a subsequent sentence say he's from London. So use your facts sparingly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Be careful how, if you have two facts about somebody, don't try and use them together. And if you have sentences that are...
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Hello?
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Oh, yeah. Kind of breaking up.
It might be best if you find one microphone that works, and then the person who wants to, and one person gives all the questions, but people ask if they can ask a question.
I'm sorry, what?
Well, I'm wondering if, because the microphone's breaking up so much, might it be best if Milroy has the microphone and you each come up?
Right, of course, yeah, okay.
Sir, wait for some time until Mr. Mulroy comes. Hello, so can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah. Please, upstairs, everybody upstairs. Yeah. Let's wait until Mr. Milroy comes. If you have questions, you can ask, or don't make him tired if you wish.
Yeah.
I'll stop sharing. Please, screen share. Guys, shall I stop sharing?
Yeah, stop sharing.
Time for?
Hello?
Yeah. Nivina, just go and check whether Milroy is on the way.
I can hear you now.
No, I was telling Veena to check whether Milroy is on the way, sir. Milroy, go and check whether Mina's the when searching. Maybe she's busy with another coordination, but he'll be back soon, sir.
I'm going to show you, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'm going to show you one article. This is a type of article which I think is important in a magazine. Okay, and it's called a list article, and it's a series of items. So this article is about the Northern Lights and where you can go. Do you all know what the Northern Lights are? They're a special effect in the north of the globe, and they it's like a sunset. But
Yeah, why it is, or you took it from a magazine or it is stolen?
this is from Living Magazine, and it's
Ah.
like it's about the Northern Lights. And basically, this page here, you can see that they're doing it country by country.
Okay.
They say, can you see the Northern Lights in the United States? Can you see the Northern Lights in Finland and Iceland and Greenland? And you can do it by plane or train. Now, this is called a list article. So this is a really good way of doing a feature. And you as a journalist come up as a series of points or items in a feature, and you make the feature piece by piece. Because then if I read it, I read that it's about the Northern Lights. I want to read more, and I go and say, oh, what's happening in Iceland? What's happening in Ireland? What's happening in Greenland? And it draws you into the article. So that's a list feature. I'm going to show you a profile feature. This is from Living Magazine. This is about Melissa. Do any of you know about who Melissa Pereira is? I don't. Anyway, this is a feature about her. Now, this page is where the journalist has taken quotes from her and made them into an article. Okay, can you see that? So let's see how it starts. Let me get my glasses. So this article starts. Okay. Even the busiest lounge bar or noisiest theatre, there's a pin drop silent as Melissa Pereira prepares to perform. Now that is a really good sentence to start an article about her, because it makes you think, what's this about? Where is she performing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 17, 18, 19, 20. And it's 20 words long. Okay, so I'll read it to you.
20 words long.
It's 20 words long. Did you get that?
Did you get that? 20 words long?
Yeah, I got that. So I'm going to read the sentence to you again. Okay, even in the busiest lounge. So it makes you wonder, where is this? What is the busiest lounge? Even in the busiest lounge bar or noisiest theatre. So it makes you think about it, gives you a description. So your mind is already coming up with a place. There's a pin drop silence as Melissa Pereira prepares to perform. Then the next sentence is the vibes are pregnant with expectation. So you're really wondering what's going to happen next. Expectation, because everyone knows that her voice will transport them to diverse places. There are lots of pieces of information there that make you want to read this article, okay? Then they get into more facts. She's sung with sounds, soul sounds and Carnaretti. So you're beginning to get facts about it. You're beginning to be told. As Associate of Trinity College London, as well as a singer, songwriter and musician, Melissa has held fast into her classical roots. That is a sentence, okay? That could then have come into 2 sentences, okay? So it could have been, as Associate of Trinity College London, as well as a singer, songwriter and musician, Melissa has held fast to her classical roots. Now it could then say, but she branched out into contemporary music, only to collect an armful of accolades at TNL on stage, etc., etc. Okay, those sentences could have been joined with a conjunction. They could have been joined with and or but. Okay, into a long sentence. Now, if you can divide it into 2 sentences, it's much better reading. Okay. Okay, do you understand that? Well, I'm assuming you do. So you've asked about good writing. You've asked about good writing and how to start an article. That is exactly how to start an article, because you get an idea and you want to read more and more as it goes through. Now, another clever thing about this article, and this is definitely where new technology has come into it, is then there are quick questions and answers. So not only is there a good written feature about it, there are then these quick questions, or not so much questions, but facts about her. So they ask her what her loves are, what her pet, what she hates about pets, what she's always wanted to be, who she admires, her role models, okay, in this quick thing. So people are attracted to that. There's another rule in articles that I have. Okay, this is a rule. So it's said that every picture is worth 1,000 words. Have you ever heard that? Every picture is worth 1,000 words. So where you see an article, so it's not entirely true, to be honest. It's a bit of a fiction, but there you might see it. There's one picture there, and an article there. Now that's not 1,000 words. Now we have a rule of thumb that every picture, so every picture is worth 1,000 words. Every picture should have a caption, okay? So if you see a picture, every single picture in an article must have a caption, okay? Whatever the picture is, it should have a caption. Now, that was a rule I was taught when I first started editing magazines. There is an addition to that I now think is that every picture, every caption needs a story. And I'll show it out of my own magazine. So one thing we've changed, there are a number, I'm going to show you in a minute, some things we've changed here. Okay. Okay, so here, okay, so these pictures are about some Japanese design, okay? Can you see the pictures? Can you see the picture? Yeah? Okay, the caption there is effectively a caption for these 3 items. But what it says is, I'm going to read it out to you, okay? The KAK Design Group were involved in the design of the Marisha Motors moped, okay? So the moped is the top picture. Now, a lot of people would have just said, all they'd have said is the Marisha Motors moped top. They wouldn't have added a story to it. They would have just described what is in the picture. Now, what I'm trying to do here is to describe the story behind the picture. And the reason is for this is that most readers will go straight to the pictures. You want to tell a story with each of the pictures, okay? Now, another thing we've had to do, and this is entirely because of trends in new trends, and this is, so here, okay? Now, what we've done here is because our magazine is available online, okay? It's available digitally through what I said is Pocket Mags. Now, readers tend to read one page at a time, because that's how they scroll through. Does that make sense? That you scroll, so you read one page at a time. So now I produce my magazine one page at a time. So what I do is for this article, which is like that, I've produced one page, which is almost entirely words, okay? It's almost entirely words, which means also that it's got facts and opinions in it. It's a bloody good read, okay? But the other page on the other side of the article is the same topic, but I put the caption into one little block, but I also put a headline to that caption. So if you find this caption on its own, when you see the magazine, you know what's in that page, but it doesn't ruin the magazine as being different. It adds quality to the magazine. Does that make sense to you all?
Yes, yes.
So this sentence here, this paragraph here, which is with the other pictures, actually tells a story of itself that draws the reader into the article. So even if the reader wants to see the photos, they're then tempted to read the whole article. Anyway, there you go. So every picture needs a caption. Every caption needs a story, okay? So if you're producing pages and somebody says, can you write captions for it? Make sure the captions tell a story. So that is a change in new technology. We wouldn't have done that before. We would have spread the photos all the way across the spread. So we would have put the photos across what's called the gutter. This is the gutter of the magazine. There's various technologies, just so you know, of a magazine. This is quite important if you're beginning to think about editing and producing a section. That is called the header. So this is called the header there. That is obviously the headline. And that is what's called the stand first, okay? The stand first is the sentence that goes beneath the headline. And that sums up the article and tells you who's the author. You then have the introduction, which is also the hook, and captions. It's pretty simple, the production of a magazine. Now here, this is a really good section in Living that I enjoy. And it starts with a column. So this is the fashion section of Living magazine, okay? And it starts with a column from somebody, and then it works through lots and lots of fashion. And some of them are photos. So this page is another page that you could read digitally. It hangs all on its own. And most of these pages in this section are done in that way. So you can read them independently. This is a really important development of magazine production. And it's the same. There are lots of similar pages with lots of photos of different people, because people want to see their photos and they want to see their designs. So that is a section. Okay, so here are some other articles. So we've also talked, we've talked about interviews and profiles, their importance, okay? This is an article of what's called a test or review. And the author is reviewing a car, okay? So he's saying how good this car is. Now, this is a really important part of the magazine. Reviews are a really important thing to learn, to be able to review a film or a book, because once again, these are calls to action. Now, buying a car isn't a call to action, because most of us are not going to buy whatever it is, Mitsubishi Mirage. But we're going to enjoy reading about this car. You enjoy reading about it even more if it's a Porsche or Ferrari. You're never going to buy a Porsche or Ferrari, but you're going to be entertained by reading it. So that's what's cool. So on the list of things that I gave on the spreadsheet, on the PowerPoint production, one of them is tests and reviews. Another of them is practical articles. So this recipes are a practical, this is needs, okay? This is where people need to have recipes to cook food. And this one is by a specialist author, a chef, and he gives one recipe. Now, elsewhere in this section, there is also, so here, okay, this is an interesting spread, okay, of articles. Now, one page, this page here, is about berries and bananas, okay? And this is like a list of berries and bananas and what's the benefit of the different berries and bananas, okay? But the article opposite it is a recipe. So on one side, you've got an article about a list of the different berries. The other, it's practical, okay? It's boring, but practical. But that's what Living Magazine is all about. How to lose kilos, okay? How to lose kilos is important, practical need for many people. So if we go back to the list of types of features, okay? Can we go back to the slide? No.
Maybe they will have to pay me then. Yes.
Okay. One further back, please.
I think this is the last one.
It should be one before it. Yeah, okay. So types of features. So here are types of features. Interviews and profiles, which we've talked about. So that's interviewing somebody. Previews and news. So this is where you're looking ahead and you're giving information. So the hook is that something is coming up. Then you have trends. So they're the articles of when there's something going on. So for instance, so they're often travel articles. So there's a trend here to travel to Laos, okay? There is a trend. So then there's a feature which goes into all about Laos, okay? But it could also be about, so in impact, in impact, there's an article here all about the death of the Pope, okay? Or of Pope Benedict XVI. So that is a trend that's happened quite recently, okay? So on that list of types of feature, that is a trend, that is a feature, it's a report, call it what you will. Practical ideas are things that you can do. So they're things that, as a result of reading the article, you can go away and make a recipe, lose some weight, go to a film, make a repair on a car, anything. Change a light bulb, all these practical ideas. There are tests and reviews and lists. So I've gone through all the different types of features. And after lunch, we're going to give you a practical exercise. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Are there any questions?
Any questions?
Ask whatever you like.
Continue the session after lunch, yes?
Yeah. We'll do the practical session after lunch. Is that okay?
Yeah, and that's yeah, give the mic. Ishini, pass the mic to Mini. Yeah, she take the closest mic.
If someone is asking a question, I can't hear it at all.
Come here.
you said about the picture speaks 1,000 words. Can you elaborate on that? Like, could you explain it again?
You need to speak a bit louder.
Yeah, when you said a picture speaks 1,000 words, and like when you were explaining that, could you repeat?
It's sort of a bit of a joke, but it's not entirely a joke because readers go to photos first, and there's always been this belief. It's not a joke, but it's a way of emphasizing the importance of a photo. And it used to be before we were able to put lots of photos on pages, and when there would be just so. Okay, here we go. The one of the Pope. Okay, this big picture of the Pope. I should think there are about 1,000 words written about it. So that up there is worth 1,000 words because it draws the reader in. That here again, that picture there is so important. It gives so much attraction to the reader that it's worth about 1,000 words. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I mean, like, I'm trying to say that it doesn't hold true anymore. Like, you know,
It doesn't what?
like it's not true anymore, like that picture.
No, it's not true. It's not true. You're absolutely right. It's not true. Mainly because it's not completely untrue because some features will have just one photo to 1,000 words. And let me find it. There is some in my own magazine. Okay, I can't find. Okay, here you go. This is one. This is on. It's not in the issue you've got, but that article there is probably about 800 words. Okay, and that is one photo. Okay, so what is on one side is one photo, and on the other is about 800 words, and they relate to one another. Now, yes, you're absolutely right. And one of the issues is because people take photos on their own phone, there are lots and lots of photos. And editors, and myself included, find it difficult to decide which ones to use. So in the end, we use too many. So we use too many photos and we use ones which actually aren't necessary for the article because we can't choose which ones are the best. In this case, every spread of this article is one section of text and one photo. And one of the reasons for this is because of the new trends in media, and you want people to read one page and to look at the other and then to move on. So it has changed, but in other ways it hasn't changed. And I've retained that rule in not all parts of my magazine, but some parts of my magazine. So there, again, this whole article is done in exactly the same way. Other articles, though, are not. So, okay, that is all one article, okay? So quite obviously, one photo is not worth 1,000 words. So it's not consistent. You're right, and I'm wrong-ish.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that make sense?
See, when you said that, what I remembered at once was Sharbat Kula, you know, the National Geographic. I don't know if you know, you know, there was this Afghan girl who got her photo taken and then it went, I don't know, it's like her photo was taken because she was seen as this this girl in a war-torn refugee person, right?
Yeah, I
But
know
then the story was completely different. But then pictures speak 1,000 words. When you think of that, it's like it was a completely different story, but people believed another story about her.
Yeah, there was a similar article, and it involved some in Africa. It was similar. There was somebody taking photos in an African village. If this is what you mean the wrong girl was used for the article. Is that what you mean?
No, what I mean is that pictures, I think that when you say pictures speak 1,000 words, it can actually be true because it does influence us so heavily because words can, words can, it depends on the person, I think. And
Well,
also how the titles that we use and how catchy the titles can be, maybe, and also how powerful our pictures can be, I think.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that for if
That's
I-
what I'm trying to say.
no, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think you're talking about a photo that's quite old in Pakistan. I think Afghanistan, of a girl who became very famous, and I suspect her photo has been used incorrectly, but it does attract readers, and it can't be ignored. Yeah, if that's what you're saying, a picture does sometimes, definitely. But that isn't necessarily that you as a journalist. That's not necessarily what you should be worried about, because what you should be is the words.
I don't think I completely agree that it doesn't, it's not true that pictures speak 1,000 words.
No, they don't always. Sometimes, I mean, these days, probably not. But I mean, it does rather depend what type of media you're looking at. This one here.
Even the examples that you showed, I feel like it depends on the person sometimes.
Well, perhaps what is different is the type of media, print or otherwise, that the reader is reading. So in newspapers, there are very often fewer photographs, not always, but sometimes. And so the reader is attracted by single images. In more complex stuff, the reader is attracted by more than one image. So this is a newspaper, and there's one image, and it's not 1,000, but it's quite a few words. But they've only used one image rather than being tempted, say, to use another one there. But it depends on the reader, what they want to read. If they want to read a long article and don't want to be influenced by other photos, then yeah, they'll want to read something more cerebral, something more intellectual, that doesn't have too many images.
Thanks.
That's okay.
Excuse me, sir. Can we have a private break? Why is supposed to be the whole day? Yeah. Sir, can you hear me?
I can hear you just.
Yeah. It's in the lunch break, so maybe after the lunch break, shall we continue the group activity?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, sir. How long we need?
I don't mind. How long would you normally have? An hour?
Yeah, usually we have 1 hour break, so shall we continue after 1 hour and you
Yeah, about 2 o'clock. 10 to 2.
2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. Yeah,
Is that okay?
okay. Sure.
All right. Have a nice lunch.